You know that feeling, right? You're staring at something important you need to do. Maybe it's a big report for work.
Or paying a bill, something like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. Or that email you know you should send. And then bam, suddenly reorganizing your sock drawer feels like the most critical thing in the world.
Uh-huh. Or, finally tackling the dust behind the fridge.
Yes. That sudden urgency for something completely unrelated. If that kind of disconnect sounds familiar, knowing what you should do versus what you actually do well, you're definitely not alone.
Not at all. Millions feel this.
And for so long, it's just been labeled, laziness or maybe poor discipline.
And that judgment is, well, it's really common, but the research we're diving into today really pushes back on that. It's kind of a harmful oversimplification, actually. Keeps people stuck.
That's exactly why we're doing this deep dive. We've got this stack of sources here, articles, some research notes. Specifically, we're pulling a lot from the emotional roots of procrastination beyond laziness.
Which is part of that procrastination paradox series from Psychology for Daily Life.
Right. And this stuff is genuinely transformative, isn't it? Because it shifts the whole perspective.
Totally. Away from seeing it as some kind of moral failing and towards understanding it as, well, a psychological behavior.
It really is. So our mission here in this deep dive, Taylor, just for you listening, is to pull out the absolute key insights from these sources. We want to get to the real why behind this almost universal behavior.
Yeah, let's challenge that lazy label.
Head on, and uncover the surprising, often quite hidden emotional core of why we put things off. The goal is just to get you informed, quickly, clearly, hopefully some aha moments.
Well, be prepared to see that procrastination, it's not really about avoiding the work itself. It's more about how you're trying to manage or maybe mismanage your own feelings about the work.
Okay, let's unpack that, because the sources make it super clear. This isn't just like a modern smartphone problem. This goes way back.
Whoa, way back. It's remarkable, actually. Ancient Greece, you've got philosophers like Socrates, Aristotle. They were wrestling with this exact thing. They called it akrasia.
Akrasia. And the sources say that means something like weakness of will.
Or acting against your better judgment.
Yeah.
They were puzzled by the same thing. Why do we choose immediate pleasure, even small stuff, over what we know is better for us long term?
Huh. So they saw people giving in to those short-term urges.
Exactly. Putting off important tasks, even when it went against their own rational thinking. It wasn't that they didn't know better. They just didn't do better.
And you can kind of see this theme continuing through history, right? Like the Middle Ages.
Spot on. You get sloth as one of the 7 deadly sins.
Right.
Now, obviously, that's viewed through a moral, sort of spiritual lens, idleness, neglecting duties. But it's tapping into that same persistent human struggle with getting things done. Shows how deep this runs.
But the shift towards, scientifically understanding it, moving past judging people, that's much more recent.
Yeah, latter half of the 20th century, the sources really point to the 1980s as being key. That's when researchers started using proper psychological methods. People like Dr. Pierce Steele and especially Dr. Tim Peakle.
Peakle. He's the one who coined that phrase, right? The one that really anchors all this research.
He did. Procrastination is an emotion regulation problem. That phrase changed everything.
That really is the core insight, isn't it? It shifts the question from what's wrong with me to, like, what am I feeling right now?
Exactly. It's not a character flaw. It's a complex psychological thing rooted in our emotions.
And this is the big reveal the sources want us to get. Procrastination, it is not laziness. It's basically an emotion regulation strategy.
That's the fundamental idea.
So let's dig into how that actually works, the mechanism, because this is where it gets really interesting. The sources say it's not that you're avoiding the task itself, maybe because it's hard or long.
Right. You're avoiding the negative feelings you connect with the task. Your brain's just trying to keep you comfortable, right now.
Like an escape hatch.
Pretty much. Your brain sees a task, thinks, ooh, this might feel bad. Anxiety, frustration, boredom, maybe feeling inadequate, overwhelmed.
All those lovely feelings.
Exactly. And it just offers you a quick out, an escape hatch to feel better instantly.
And the research breaks down some specific emotional drivers. The first big one they mention is fear of failure, or sometimes even fear of success.
Yeah, that's a major one. The task feels like a test, right? What if I mess up? What if it's not good enough? What if people judge me? That dread of potential failure can be so strong.
That avoiding it feels safer.
Totally. It's self-protection, protecting yourself from that anticipated pain.
And fear of success. How does that work?
It's less common, but the sources mention it, like Succeeding might mean more work, higher expectations, maybe big life changes that feel kind of scary.
Ah, okay. So the potential discomfort of that future makes you put things off now,
Exactly.
which seems really closely tied to perfectionism, another driver they talk about.
Oh, absolutely linked. Perfectionism creates this huge internal pressure if the only acceptable result is flawless.
Starting feels incredibly risky because anything less than perfect is failure.
Right. So the subconscious thought is kind of like, well, if I don't start, I can't fail. If I don't finish, it can't be imperfect. It gives you this temporary feeling of control just by, not engaging.
And sometimes it's less about the outcome and more just the task itself feels too big, too complicated, leading to anxiety and overwhelm.
Huge one. Staring at a blank page, a chaotic inbox, a massive project,
Hmm.
it can trigger this intense feeling of, where do I even start?
Yeah, that paralysis.
And that anxiety feels awful. So the brain's immediate reaction is often just, let's back away.
Hmm.
The sources use this great analogy. Procrastination is like taking a painkiller for a broken bone.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, it numbs the pain right now. It makes you feel better for a bit.
But does zero to fix the actual problem.
And probably makes it worse in the long run.
That really lands.
Yeah.
Okay, what about tags that aren't scary? Just dull.
Ah, yes. Simple boredom and aversion. Our brains are wired for novelty, for stimulation.
Right. We like interesting things.
We do. So tedious, repetitive, uninteresting tasks. They're the opposite of what our brain wants. And the pull towards something more engaging, scrolling social media, watching a quick video, that pull is strong because it offers instant, easy stimulation.
So procrastination is just dodging the discomfort of boredom for something that feels better now.
Pretty much.
And kind of tragically, beating ourselves up about it seems to backfire completely. The sources mention lack of self-compassion.
Oh, such a vicious cycle. That really harsh inner voice, you're so lazy, just get it together. It
Yeah.
doesn't motivate, it just floods you with shame, guilt.
For negative emotions.
Exactly. More negative emotions. And what does the brain want to do with negative emotions?
Escape them.
Right. So the self-criticism creates more feelings to avoid, leading straight back to more procrastination. It paralyzes you, doesn't push you forward.
And then there's resentment, where the feeling isn't about the task itself, but maybe who assigned it.
Yeah, putting off something you feel you shouldn't have to do, or something given to you by someone you're frustrated with. The sources say this can be a kind of passive-aggressive move.
Like exerting control.
A little bit.
Right.
Or expressing that frustration indirectly by, dragging your feet.
Okay, so this immediate avoidance, it gives temporary relief, but there's a cost. How does this quick fix turn into such a stubborn pattern? There's a vicious cycle involved, right? And cognitive biases.
Yeah, this is where that mood repair thing becomes the problem. You face the task, you anticipate feeling bad.
Dread, anxiety, boredom.
Right, and your brain offers the quick fix. Hey, instead of feeling that, let's go do something easy or fun.
Like checking email for the 10th time, or suddenly needing coffee.
Precisely, and boom, immediate, but very fleeting relief. Little mood lift, maybe a tiny dopamine hit. Your brain registers. Success, mood repaired.
But, and this is the crucial but, the sources stress this short-term gain leads directly to long-term pain.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because the task, still there. But now the deadline's closer, maybe the task feels even bigger, and you've layered stress and guilt on top of whatever you felt initially.
So the negative feelings actually multiply.
They often do. Which feeds right into the procrastination cycle the sources describe. Step 1. Encounter the unpleasant task.
Step 2, anticipate feeling bad about it.
Step 3. Seek immediate mood repair. Avoid the task.
Step 4, get that temporary, fleeting relief. Feel a bit better for a moment.
Step 5. Face the consequences, piling up more stress, more guilt, less time, maybe missed chances.
And step 6, the kicker, reinforcement.
Yes, the brain learns avoiding felt good temporarily. So the urge to procrastinate next time gets even stronger. It's this awful self-perpetuating loop of feeling bad, avoiding, feeling briefly better, then feeling much worse overall.
And underpinning this cycle, the sources explain, is a cognitive bias called temporal discounting.
This is fundamental to how our brains work. We are just wired to value immediate rewards way more than future rewards.
So the relief from not doing the task now
Is an immediate reward. It feels good right this second. The satisfaction of finishing or avoiding future stress, that's way off in the future.
and our brains struggle with that delay.
Our sort of primal brain really struggles to prioritize that distant gain over the immediate discomfort or the immediate pleasure of avoiding. Pain now versus reward later. Now almost always wins.
So it's less about being irrational or lazy and more about this built-in bias.
Largely, yes.
Yeah.
It's a deep-seated cognitive shortcut.
And the consequences of chronic procrastination, getting stuck in this loop, the sources emphasize they go way beyond just missed deadlines.
Oh, definitely. They talk about serious impacts on mental health, higher stress, anxiety, depression, loads of guilt and shame. It chips away at your self-trust, your confidence. It
Hmm.
can hurt relationships, stall careers, and even affect physical health when you put off important things like doctor visits or healthy habits. It's a really painful cycle of self-sabotage for many people.
Wow. Okay, so once you start seeing procrastination through this emotional lens, you really do start noticing it everywhere. Not just the big work project. It's really in the wild, as they say.
Yeah, the sources give a bunch of examples of how this plays out day to day.
Like the classic one, academic procrastination. Putting off essays, studying.
Yep. Driven by pressure, feeling overwhelmed by the size of it, fear of getting a bad grade, all those emotional triggers.
Then there's professional procrastination at work.
Putting off those tough emails, maybe avoiding difficult conversations, delaying boring data entry, postponing presentations.
All tied to things like fear of conflict, anxiety about how you'll do, or just sheer boredom.
Exactly.
And the sources really flag health procrastination. That seems particularly worrying.
It's crucial. Delaying checkups, putting off exercise or healthy eating, avoiding the doctor when something feels off.
Why do we do that?
Often it's fear of bad news, discomfort with change, or just that immediate gratification. The unhealthy choice feels easier now.
Mm,
The classic, I'll start my diet Monday. That's avoiding the immediate discomfort of making a healthier choice.
right. Finances, too. Financial procrastination.
Oh, yeah. Avoiding budgets, delaying bills, putting off saving, not wanting to look at bank statements,
Sounds like anxiety about money.
often. Or guilt about spending, or just feeling overwhelmed and out of control. Easier to just not look.
And then just life stuff, personal life procrastination.
The chores that pile up, fixing the leaky faucet, dealing with paperwork mountain,
Yeah.
but also bigger things like putting off hard talks with family or making major life decisions.
Driven by overwhelm again, or maybe fear of conflict, or just the pain of thinking deeply about things.
All of the above.
And then there's that really sneaky one they call productive procrastination.
Ah, the master of disguise.
Yeah.
This is when you avoid the really important, emotionally heavy task by doing other, less important tasks that still feel productive.
Like cleaning the whole house when you should be writing a report.
Exactly. Or answering every single email except the really hard one. It gives you this illusion you're getting stuff done.
And it works emotionally because you feel busy.
Right. That feeling of accomplishing something temporarily masks the anxiety or boredom tied to the real priority. It's still an escape hatch, just a more disguised one.
Looking at all these examples, it becomes so clear. It's consistently about dodging unpleasant feelings right now, chasing that brief comfort, even when we know, logically, it's going to cause more trouble later.
And really getting that emotional root is the key, because then we can finally tackle some of those really persistent, unhelpful myths about procrastination.
Okay, let's bust them. Myth #1, procrastinators are just lazy.
The sources are really strong on this. This is the most damaging myth.
Huh.
The reality, most procrastinators are capable, smart, often highly motivated people who care a lot about doing well.
They're not idle.
Not at all. They're often locked in this intense internal battle with these emotional roadblocks. The guilt, the stress they feel, that's the total opposite of laziness.
Okay, good riddance to that myth. Myth #2, procrastination is just a time management problem.
Well, time management tools, planners, breaking tasks down, deadlines that can be helpful for sure. They're useful tools.
But not the whole story.
Not for chronic procrastination, no. The research shows they're often not enough if you don't address the emotional reason behind the delay. Like, a planner tells you when, but it doesn't magically fix the anxiety stopping you from starting.
So time management organizes, but doesn't necessarily motivate if the emotion is the block.
Right. You need to understand the emotion to actually get going.
Okay, what about this one? I hear this a lot. Myth #3, some people just work better under pressure.
The classic justification. The sources admit, yes, the adrenaline rush near a deadline can kickstart action. But they frame it as a coping mechanism, not a good strategy. Constantly relying on panic. It usually leads to lower quality work, more mistakes, way less creativity, and just huge amounts of stress.
So the pressure is just the panic finally outweighing the dread of starting.
Pretty much. It forces action, sure, but it's not promoting quality or well-being. It's just last-minute desperation.
Makes sense. And finally, myth #4. Procrastination is a character flaw, a sign of weakness.
Again, the research really pushes back hard on this moral judgment. It's not a moral failing. It's a complex behavior pattern that comes from psychological mechanisms.
A learned coping strategy.
Exactly. A learned, though often unhelpful way to cope with difficult feelings. Calling it a flaw just piles on shame and guilt, which, as we saw, just fuels the cycle.
So framing it as this maladaptive attempt to manage emotions.
Allows for curiosity, self-compassion, and finding strategies that actually work based on understanding, not self-blame.
Getting rid of these myths really does feel like the crucial first step. It lets you approach it with understanding, maybe some empathy for yourself instead of just criticism.
Absolutely. And the research is still evolving.
Yeah.
The sources give us a little peek into the future, how our understanding is deepening across different fields.
Yeah, they mentioned it's this intersection of neuroscience, psychology, technology.
Right. A big area is neuroscience and brain imaging, using things like fMRI scans to actually see what's happening in the brain when procrastination kicks in.
What are they looking for?
They're focusing on areas involved in decision-making, emotion regulation, the prefrontal cortex, the limbic system, trying to map the neural pathways behind things like temporal discounting and impulsivity. The hope is, maybe finding more targeted interventions someday.
And using the understanding for more personalized interventions.
Exactly. Moving beyond generic advice. Since people procrastinate for different emotional reasons, fear versus boredom, say future strategies might be tailored much more specifically to your triggers, your personality, your cognitive style.
Things like mindfulness and self-compassion seem to be getting more research attention too.
Definitely. Studies are looking at how these practices help break that avoidance cycle. Learning to just sit with uncomfortable feelings, notice them without immediately needing to escape.
Builds resilience to the urge.
That's the idea. And self-compassion is key to counteracting that harsh inner critic, breaking the guilt loop.
They also mention refining existing therapies like advanced CBT and ACT.
Yeah. Cognitive behavioral therapy helps challenge those unhelpful thought patterns. Acceptance and commitment therapy focuses on accepting the tough feelings while still taking action based on your values. Research is aiming to sharpen these tools specifically for tackling the emotional avoidance behind procrastination.
And bringing in ideas from behavioral economics and nudging.
Right. Looking at how small tweaks to our environment or how choices are framed can subtly push us in the right direction. Think accountability partners, commitment devices like apps that block distractions, or just designing tasks to feel less emotionally burdensome. Gentle nudges.
And inevitably, technology has a role to play.
For sure. Beyond basic apps. Maybe wearables that sense rising stress and prompt you, AI that learns your patterns and offers personalized nudges, even using gamification to make dreaded tasks feel a bit more engaging, less emotionally heavy.
And lastly, they pointed to the wider societal and cultural context.
Recognizing that modern life hustle culture, constant distractions, FOMO, can actually make things worse.
Right.
It adds to the emotional load. So future work might look at how we can create environments, workplaces, even societal norms that reduce some of that pressure.
So looking ahead, it's not just about productivity hacks. It's a much deeper, more holistic view of why we delay brain, psychology, society aiming for well-being and self-compassion, not just ticking boxes.
It's about treating the root cause, absolutely, not just slapping a bandage on the symptom.
Okay, so let's bring this deep dive full circle for you listening. Next time you find yourself looking at that important task and suddenly feel that magnetic pull towards, I don't know, cleaning your keyboard, just pause, take a breath.
And understand this. What you're feeling, it isn't laziness. It's a signal. Your brain is trying to protect you from an uncomfortable emotion, maybe fear, anxiety, boredom, feeling overwhelmed. The sources are so clear. Just understanding this is the most powerful first step you can take.
That shift in perspective is huge, isn't it? Moving from what's wrong with me to asking, okay, what emotion am I trying to dodge right now? It reframes everything. It opens the door to actual strategies, not just endless willpower battles.
You now have some real insight into the why. And that knowledge is like a compass. It empowers you to approach things differently with self-compassion, with some strategic thinking about your own emotional landscape, instead of just brute force or beating yourself up.
And here's a final thought for you to mull over, drawn from everything we've covered from the sources. Consider how this whole emotion regulation thing, the strategy, isn't just for the big, scary projects. How deeply is it woven into the tiny delays in your day?
Like hitting snooze again and again.
Yeah, or putting off that quick phone call, or delaying a simple chore just a little longer. What might that pattern tell you about the constant emotional navigating your brain is doing, even with the small stuff?
It suggests that the path to actually getting things done really does start with understanding and maybe working with that internal emotional world.